All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're talking about adaptive life cycles. This is a really powerful way to manage projects, especially in a world where, let's be honest, nothing ever stands still. If you've ever been on a project where the goals just keep shifting, then you are definitely in the right place. And this question right here is really the heart of the whole thing. Traditional project management, it loves a nice, neat, fixed plan. But reality is messy. Customer needs change, new tech pops up, and a single piece of feedback can turn everything on its head. So how on earth do you build anything good when you don't even know exactly what the finish line looks like? Well, that is precisely the problem adaptive frameworks were born to solve. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with what I call the 3 core artifacts. These are the foundational documents for any adaptive project. Then, we'll get into how we use user stories to capture what actually matters to people. From there, we'll walk through the whole 9-step Agile process, and we'll wrap it all up with your very own adaptive toolkit. Okay, first up, the 3 core artifacts. Now, when I say artifact, don't go thinking about something you'd find in a museum. In this world, an artifact is just a key document or a deliverable that guides the whole project. And in adaptive projects, there are 3 you absolutely have to know. The first one is the product backlog. I want you to think of this as the project's single source of truth. It is the master list of everything, and I mean everything. Every feature, every fix, every idea that needs to get done. The product owner is the guardian of this backlog, and their job is to constantly tweak and reprioritize it to make sure the team is always working on the most valuable thing. Next, we have the sprint backlog. So if the product backlog is the giant wish list for the entire project, the sprint backlog is the team's to-do list for right now. The team just pulls a small, manageable handful of items from the very top of the product backlog to get done in a short cycle we call a sprint. And, this might sound a little familiar if you've done traditional project management. It's actually a lot like a work breakdown structure, or WBS. But the key difference is the WBS tries to map out the whole project, while a sprint backlog is laser-focused on just the next couple of weeks. And our third artifact is the product increment. This is the good stuff. This is the actual, tangible result of all the work in a sprint. It's a usable, potentially shippable piece of the product. At the end of every single sprint, the team has built a new increment, which they show to the customer to get that all-important feedback. This is how the project literally grows and adapts, one little piece at a time. So we have our backlogs, but what do we actually put in them? Well, it's not just some boring checklist of tasks. Adaptive projects are built around something much more human, the user story. A user story is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a short, simple sentence that describes a feature from the point of view of the person who's actually gonna use it. So there's no technical jargon. It's all about framing the work around the value it gives to a real person. For instance, instead of a task like build search bar, a user story would be, as a shopper, I want to search for products so I can find what I need quickly. You see the difference, right? It keeps the team totally focused on the why, not just the what. Now, every good user story has 2 key ingredients. First is the requirement itself. That's the part that spells out the who, the what, and the why, just like in our shopper example. But, and this is super important, you also need the second part, the acceptance criteria. For that search story, the criteria might be things like results must show up in under 1 second, or it has to handle common misspellings. These are the specific black and white conditions that tell everybody, okay, this story is officially done. So, how do you manage a backlog that's packed with all these stories? Well, you follow the DEEP model. It's a great little acronym to remember. D is for detailed. Stories at the top of a list need enough detail for the team to get started right away. E is for estimated. The team needs a rough idea of how much effort each story will take. It's not about being perfect, but it's crucial for planning. The next E is for emergent. This just means the backlog is a living document. It's not set in stone, it's supposed to change and evolve. And finally, P is for prioritized. The most valuable, most important stuff is always right at the top. Simple as that. Okay, we have our artifacts and our user stories. Now let's put it all into motion and walk through the whole Agile process, from the first glimmer of an idea all the way to a finished product increment. The whole thing kicks off with a planning and prioritization phase. This is where we lay the groundwork. But here's the twist. Unlike in traditional projects, you're not trying to map out every single detail for the next year. You're just getting enough information to get the first sprint started. So here's how that first phase really plays out, step by step. First, the product owner meets with the customer to really dig in and understand what they need. Second, they work together to turn those needs into user stories. Third, the dev team jumps in, looks at the stories, and figures out how to build them. That becomes the acceptance criteria. Fourth, the product owner takes that back to the customer to make sure everyone's on the same page. And finally, all those approved user stories get put into the product backlog and ranked by priority. Now you're ready to go. With that initial backlog ready, we can step into the real engine room of the whole process, the sprint cycle. This is the repeating loop of planning, building, and learning that really drives the project forward. Here's the rhythm of the sprint. It's 4 key beats. First, the team plans the sprint by pulling those top priority stories into their sprint backlog. Then they build. For a fixed amount of time, usually somewhere between 1 and 4 weeks, the team just focuses on turning those stories into a finished product increment, often what's called a minimal viable product, or MVP. It's just enough to be useful and to get feedback. At the end of the sprint, they demo that new increment to the customer. And finally, they adapt. Based on that feedback, the product owner refines the main backlog, and the team looks back at how they can improve their process. And then, the whole cycle starts all over again. And this quote really says it all, doesn't it? This isn't a one-and-done thing. The team repeats this sprint cycle: plan, build, demo, adapt, over and over and over. Each cycle creates something new and valuable, moving the project closer to the finish line while adapting to real feedback along the way. Whew! We have covered a lot of ground. So let's just take a breath and do a quick recap. Let's assemble your adaptive toolkit with the absolute must-knows. Okay, here's the cheat sheet. Remember the 3 artifacts. The product backlog is your master list, the sprint backlog is your to-do list for now, and the product increment is the thing you actually built. Remember that user stories are all about the who, what, and why. Use the deep model to keep your backlog in good shape. And finally, remember that the whole process is just a continuous cycle of planning, building, and learning from your customers. So, the framework we've just walked through, it's elegant, it's powerful, it's a beautiful process on paper, right? But any process is only as good as the people using it. So I want to leave you with one last question to chew on. Now that you get the mechanics, what do you think is the biggest human challenge in making all of this actually work? Is it communication? Is it building trust with the customer? Or is it just letting go of old habits? Because that's where the real work begins.